I was asked by a subscriber to do a video on engraving a thistle, and how could I not engrave Scotland's national flower? Welcome everybody, or welcome back if you've been here before. Today's video is going to be about engraving a thistle. Now there's a complication to that you might not be aware of, because there are lots of different kinds of thistles. Some of them are great big flowers, some of them are quite tiny, some of them have a scent, some of them have no scent, they come in different colours. Most of them are spiky. One variety, called the melancholy thistle, has no spikes at all. So to start this process, I had to draw myself out an idea of a generic thistle that I could use for the engraving. I've attached that drawing to the description of the video. You feel free to download it, use it for yourself if you would like to, but it is a bit rough and ready. It's just enough to give me an idea of what I'm going to engrave. So having got that done, all I have to do is attach it to the glass, head off to the workbench and start engraving. Often when I'm engraving, I start by marking out the outline with a white Arkansas stone. But in this case, because it's quite a loose drawing, I've just started by taking a medium-sized spherical diamond bar. And what I'm doing is I'm going over these little areas. They look like little scales on the bottom of the thistle. Now I've started with the ones at the top, and then I'm working the way down the body of the flower. The reason for doing that is so that the bottom scales then look like they're lying over the top of the ones that are up above them. And I'm not being very fussy at this point, just picking out the scales. Now I've moved to an old rat's tail diamond bar, and I'm using that to mark in the little petals just at the top of the flower, just at the top of the bud, where they're starting to emerge here. That's the bud roughed in, and so I've moved on to marking in the stems. This is quite a large round diamond bar, and I'm just running it down the stems. I'm cutting fairly deeply, I suppose. There's plenty of glass here to work with, so I can easily do that. I'm just trying to make a smooth stem. Using the same bar, I'm moving on to rough in the little leaves here. Now they're fairly spiky, but all I'm trying to do at the moment is get a rough idea of the shape. This bar is quite big, but because I'm not being very fussy about it, I'm just getting a rough idea. It works quite well for me. You might think a thistle is an odd sort of flower to have as a national flower. But the story is that hundreds of years ago, a group of Scots were lying, sleeping at night, while some enemies tried to attack them, tried to sneak up on them. The story is a bit vague about whether they were a group of Vikings or some English people, or we don't know. But anyway, they tried to sneak up on the Scots as they were sleeping, and as they did so, one of them trod on a thistle with presumably a bare foot, and cried out in pain. That woke up the Scots, who managed to fight off their attackers and won the day. So that is why the thistle is Scotland's national flower. Now you'll have noticed that I have continued with this bigger bar, and I have been working on the scales on this top flower, which are a bit bigger. So that's why the bigger bar works better for them. And I just use the same system of starting at the top and working my way down the body of the flower so that the scales look as if they are overlaying each other. And again, the same bar, and just roughing in the shape of the leaves at this top part as well. Now the flower part, these little bits are thicker than they were on the bud. So again, the larger round burr works quite well. And this is, in reality, of course, it's a three-dimensional shape and we're trying to transfer it onto a two-dimensional surface. So to help me get an idea of depth, I've started by putting in the furthest away bits of the flower, just roughly, and then I'm coming back to put in a second layer which overlays those slightly further down the flower, and then I'll come back again and put in another layer, and hopefully that will help to create the impression of a flower that is three-dimensional, one way or the other. I'm not being terribly fussy about where each individual little petal lies, I'm just roughing them in. Now with that in, I can take away the paper, which may help you to see this a bit more clearly. And I've got a small white Arkansas stone, and what I'm doing is going over those areas that I've already engraved, maybe putting in some paler tones, making sure all the areas are covered with some sort of engraving, doing the same on the leaves. On the leaves, what I'm trying to do is look at which part of the leaf I think would be in most shadow, and I've decided it's the sort of bottom part of each leaf. And I'm going over those most carefully with the white Arkansas stone so that I can then polish those bits and get the idea of the shadow. Up onto the main part of the flower, and again with this white stone I'm just going over it. I'm introducing some mid-tone petals and also just going over the areas which weren't engraved during that first rough engraving so that it doesn't look like I've just missed bits out. Having done that, I'll do the same where the little spiky scales are underneath, making sure that everything is engraved and introducing that mid-tone between them all. I also need to do the same on these petals, these are leaves, on these leaves as I did at the ones at the bottom, using the white Arkansas stone to pre-polish what I'm looking at as being the bottom part of each leaf at the moment. And then I'll get more shadow when I go over those with the polishing rubber. This is a black disc polishing rubber, and I'm running that over, and you can see where using the white Arkansas stone means that these bits polish out quite nice and dark. The little scales are starting to become much more apparent. You can probably see them now much more easily. The disc is a little bit too big for these little leaves, so I've moved on to the little pin rubber polisher, and that works quite nicely for the smaller areas on the leaf. So now that I've got all the shade in, it's time to start putting back in some highlight. I've taken a diamond rat's tail burr, and I'm just going over some of the petals at the top, making sure that there's some highlights there. And then I'm going over areas on each of these little scales, picking out the highlight at the top of each one, so that they become a little bit more apparent and a little bit more three-dimensional. It also helps to make them look a little bit more spiky. This little rat's tail is better for putting the spikes on at the end of each one, because these bits are quite spiky too. That's beginning to look a bit more like what I'm trying to get to. I have to use this rat's tail again. These leaves are really spiky. They have got lots of sharp points on them, and the rat's tail helps me to pick those out quite nicely. So I just have to work my way around each leaf, looking for the sharpest pointy bits, putting those in, and that also helps to highlight areas just to make it look a little bit more interesting. I don't want everything to be all the one tone, it would be very dull. So the highlight sort of brings the whole thing together, makes it come alive really. And you can see hopefully that the little rat's tail is allowing me to put the spikes right out to the end, There are a few spikes as well on the stems. Everything about a thistle is spiky, or these ones anyway. And they all need to be just finished off and made to look as if they would prickle you if you tried to grab them. I don't need to be very fussy about this. This isn't meant to be a botanical drawing or anything like that. I'm just trying to make it look like a thistle, look like it might be sharp and might hurt you if you tried to pick it. More spikes on the stem down here, just one or two. And those are now all in and finished. So that was quite a quick engraving to do, and I think it looks quite pretty. The thistle looks quite nice on this cylinder of glass. And it's quite a commercial thing for me to engrave in Scotland. Obviously I can quite easily sell things with thistles on them, but it'll depend on where you are, on whether people like thistles, I suppose. Anyway, I very much enjoyed that engraving. I hope you found it useful. If you did, then if you click the like button, that would be very helpful for me. And if you like this type of content, then please subscribe. I do have a few more videos that I will have to do. The same person who wanted a thistle also asked about a Highland cow. I have a couple I need to do about different types of texture, a few other ideas. So if you're interested, then I hope that you'll come back and see these future videos. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.